Welcome everybody to On Podcast, the On Microsoft podcast, where we talk about Microsoft things on a podcast. And today we'll be talking about a lot of Microsoft things on this very podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Anderson. I'm joined by the world's greatest co-host.
Arif Bacchus.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's all Microsoft all day today. So let's just get through our laundry list of news, and we'll kind of cover some things that we missed last week. We didn't record, but we're still going to talk about it very briefly.
Yeah, we last week was a big week, and unfortunately we weren't able to record. But we there was a lot of heavy hitting topics that happened in the Microsoft world last week. First of all, was the May 2021 update finally launched, and it did not launch in July this time. They actually launched it in time, and we covered it in the past before. There's not a lot of new features or anything, so we didn't miss anything major there. But a big heavy hitting topic that we did miss is the launch of Windows 10X not coming in 2021. And I know this is close to your heart, so why don't you get over it in a few seconds?
Yeah, there's no Windows 10X. There was barely ever Windows 10X because of, I mean, we had that ISO that went out to a bunch of people just to kind of test it. So there's really no love lost here. I mean, for all of us who were in the industry, that we're super happy to kind of talk about it and get our hopes up about a new version of Windows. But many of us still scratched our head about what it was going to be. Microsoft relieved all of us of that issue and just said not coming. And they had a blog post when they released the May update saying that we are going to take bits of it and put it into Windows. We'll probably be covering more and more about these bits, especially as Sun Valley comes up, and I believe they're going to be holding a Windows event at some point in the next couple months. So Windows 10X not here. The only other big question left is, does the Neo now become a Surface Mini kind of device that gets dumped in a landfill somewhere? Because that's what Windows 10X was designed for. So we'll keep an eye out on it.
And then something that launched last week also was the Teams personal features. It was in beta testing, and now it finally launched last week. So now you'll be able to chat with your friends and family on Teams, on desktop, and on mobile.
Yeah. So those are the updates from last week. I mean, obviously, we would have gone into greater detail about them. A lot of those things will be rolled into the upcoming weeks as we go on, because again, once you release something, there's maintenance about it. There's more news. There's more features. There's more updates. So um, just know that those aren't stories that will just be dead and gone.
But other topics now for this week, not last week. We're in the present now. Is Build 2021 happened this week, and there was a lot of news, especially if you're a developer. If you're a consumer, I know some people were let down that it wasn't the big show that they expected it to be. But there are still a couple of stories that you should have paid attention to at Build if you're a Microsoft fan and if you're a consumer. And we'll recap those for you. Basically, it covers Outlook and Teams and the Linux GUI apps in Windows 10 and a couple of other stories. So we'll run through those really quickly for you. And then Nadella said something big about the future of Windows at Build.
Yeah, it's big in its consequences. It was small in its announcement. After I believe a 45-minute keynote, he tossed in at the very end about how excited he was about, and I'm paraphrasing, I can't quote him exactly, about the development of Windows and the new things that should be coming to it. A lot of people ran with this idea, thinking it's Sun Valley. A lot of us pessimists see it as just a new rebranding of the Microsoft Store. We'll get into it, but he basically said that he's super excited about the developments of Windows coming soon.
And something that's not coming soon, that is already out, that was announced at Build, is Edge version 91. And we'll look through the release and tell you everything that's new. It's catching up with Chrome, and it's not a performance hack. They have some new features like sleeping tabs and starter boost that we'll just roll through really quickly and let you know what's new in this release. And speaking of rolling through really quickly, Fast Recap is back, and I'll let you cover the topics for Fast Recap.
Yeah, we got a ton. We have Microsoft and Bethesda Game Showcase on June 13th, so we know that I don't know if this is tied in with um, E3 or if this is just a separate thing leading into, but we have a games announcement and we'll see where the future of Bethesda goes. A lot of people are thinking exclusives. Other of us are just thinking new games that they're going to start kind of hinting at and talking about. The next thing we have is Microsoft wants to revolutionize the Windows 10 experience, which again goes back to what Nadella just said at Build. A little bit about what Nadella said, a little bit about what panel set at the end of last year as well. So a lot of Windows 10 experience talk. So we'll see what they do with that because Microsoft's always big on talk. And then this is based on a jobs posting too. So this isn't like an executive coming out. We just are kind of gleaning some information from that jobs posting. And then there's also the Microsoft Duo, which gets better touch controls for cloud gaming. So where they couldn't necessarily produce the experience people wanted for dual screens, they're at least making up for it for making it a Nintendo Switch-like experience for those of us who might go out and buy a $600 Surface Duo now.
And then after that, we have our week ahead segment, which is the end of the show where we talk about all the things we will talk about in the next week at on Microsoft. And Dell was kind enough to send us a OLED version of the XPS 13 for review. So I'll have my quick impressions in that segment. And then we just came off taping a special interview with a certain YouTuber who you guys might be familiar with. So we'll be teasing that. And what about this What's Next for Windows event? Someone is saying that maybe it could be coming up in June or maybe sometime next month.
Yeah, as I had mentioned, Build, as you had kind of alluded to, Build was very developer focused, very big on AI, very big on Azure, very big on Linux, but not very much on the Windows itself, not anything that most of us consumers would be interested in. And that's led a lot of people to believe that they're going to host a specific Windows event where they can kind of just go for half an hour, 45 minutes, however long the event is, to start teasing some of this big Sun Valley redesign, which is, for some people more than just a few new icons and a splash of colors and paints. Zach has always been one to feel thinks it's a more grandiose endeavor as far as like moving some certain things around, elements around the interface. So if June 13th is the gaming one, they may hold off because you have WWDC right before that or right around that time. So within the next 2 weeks, if we don't hear anything about it, but it'll probably be a few weeks or so after the gaming one, just to give Microsoft some time to let news kind of soak in. So we could be looking at the end of June or sometime in July, since they want to space these things out maybe a month apart for some big news about Windows.
And speaking of news, Build 2021 was a news fest, as we like to say in the industry. We
Not
had
snooze fest, news
news
fest.
fest.
Some
We
people would say
have
snooze.
visit onmicrosoft.com and click the Build 2021 section at the top, and you could scroll through all of our news stories to see what happened during Build. But we're not here to rehash everything that happened. We just want to cover some of the more important things as Microsoft fans and as consumers. We're not really developers. I mean, we had a developer before, but we're just gonna cover the stories that mattered most. And the first one that mattered most is Microsoft seems to finally be taking Windows 10 on ARM seriously. They announced the Snapdragon Developer Kit, which is a lot like what Apple did with their, I think it's called the Developer Transition Kit or something like that. But basically, Apple had a special kit where they put the M1 in a Mac Mini and they allowed developers to code their apps before the general release of M1 architecture to MacBooks and Mac Minis. And now Microsoft is doing something similar with this Snapdragon Developer Kit. It's an affordable Windows on ARM-based PC that is specially designed for developers. The kit will be available for purchase at the Microsoft Store this summer as part of a partnership between Microsoft and Qualcomm Technologies. Now, Microsoft didn't share how much the kit will cost, but the idea is developers won't need to run out and go and buy a Surface Pro X or some $1,000 or $1,500 PC just so they could code for ARM-based PCs and change their apps for ARM-based PCs. So it's giving hope that Microsoft finally waked up and realized that ARM is the future. And here we go. We now need to put everything back in the developers' hands. What are your thoughts on that?
It's twofold. I agree with you that they finally have woken up, but we also have to take in context that these things are years of years in the planning. So this developer kit, I would assume, would have been a concept or an idea that was thought of maybe a year or two
Yeah.
ago. Apple just happened to blow the doors off of everybody's expectations with the M1, but I'm sure this plan for Windows ARM development kits have been in works for Microsoft and Snapdragon developers, things like that, for a while. Um, again, Apple just kind of beat them to the punch. On my side of it, it isn't necessarily the bastion of development that I think people are hoping for as far as Windows on ARM. I think because of the way it kind of landed, how lackluster it was to begin with, it's going to be really hard to get people back on board for this. I think at this point, what Microsoft needs to do is nail down the emulation layer, so that developers they can just tell developers that it just works and that it actually does just work. I know a lot of times Microsoft likes to say that, and then there are a lot of hidden strings about like how what platforms you need to develop for first, what bits you need to have in place before you start even working on any of this. And so, without any of these gotchas, if they can just nail down their ARM emulation, or I guess um, the transition layer for this, and the way that they open up the containers, things like that. If they can nail that, which I think they've showed some progress on last November, last October, November-ish, then they'll be in good footing. These developer kits again still cost extra money. So if you're already have a
Yeah.
Windows PC, you still need to go out and buy this thing and then develop for, versus saying like, hey, here's something that we built for you within Windows. You can VM into it, unwrap everything, and it just kind of works. I, I feel like that's where they need to go. Again, I appreciate the effort, and I would love to see a ton of it come from it. But I think at this point, either you push PWAs or you get the emulation layer. I don't think either of those two things, beyond those two things, developers are interested in, at least on the Windows side. You can't really point to a new Windows app that's been created specifically for Windows. Everything's kind of been created for the web and ported back to Windows or Android at this point. So it's sort of chasing where the puck is versus where it's going to be for Windows with this developer kit. Again, I could be entirely wrong. I'm not a huge developer. I just see a lot of developer talk as far as what they're interested in and where they can afford to put their resources. And Windows 10 isn't a huge one if you're not an enterprise. So if they can just tell developers like, hey, the apps that you've already created, all the time you've invested, all the resources you've invested, just work on ARM now. It may take a few seconds to unwrap it, just like they did with the M1. But once it's unwrapped, it works just as fine. I think developers will get on board with adding new features. So
And
yeah,
And
go
it's
ahead.
not like Microsoft is all on their own with this. They're together with Qualcomm, and I think it was the day before build that Qualcomm announced the Snapdragon 7C Gen 2, which is the budget entry for ARM devices, and it increases the battery life and performance of what should be a new upcoming wave of affordable ARM-based PCs. So, and then on top of that, Microsoft also beefed up ARM with like you mentioned, the 64-bit app emulation on the Surface Pro X. And they have a program together with Qualcomm where you could test to see if your apps would work on ARM or not. Like they're working closely with developers to make sure that everything is working. And their own apps finally work on ARM. Edge is one, Visual Studio is another, and Teams is another. So there's a lot of hope out there that we'll be getting more speedy, more beefy, more it just works Windows 10 on ARM PCs.
That's the goal, and I think once they can come to the table with that, the ARM development should flow. And again, I think at this point, what we are kind of coalescing with ARM development is longer battery life, thinner devices. So if they can get their own apps to work like they should, all the other stuff is just icing on the cake.
And that was just one story about on the Windows 10 side. There are other stories, but this is not really a consumer thing. But I know some consumers do like to play with the Windows subsystem for Linux and Windows Terminal. And I'll let you handle that side of the news.
Yeah, it just depends on the type of consumer you are. These consumers are developer heavy essentially, and they have to VM into their devices, or spread out their development across different platforms. So with that being said, Microsoft announced several development themed updates for Windows 10, including support for the GUI, the GUI, Linux apps, and Windows subsystem for Linux, and some for new Windows Terminal capabilities as well. With Windows Terminal 1.9 now in preview, Microsoft is including a new Quake mode feature. Yeah, the name is a bit odd, but basically what it does is it allows whoever's using it to open up the new terminal windows from anywhere within Windows 10 using a quick keyboard shortcut. So no longer having to, if you're a developer and you barely ever use a mouse, this is just another feature to help you kind of open up things. As you may recall, Windows Terminal was first added in 2019 to Windows 10 for those who run the command line. So it's been there for some time for people to use, and they're just adding more features to it because, again, they know that their audience is, again, multi-platform. Not everything just has to be about Windows. As for the GUI Linux apps in Windows Subsystem, this is previously tested with Windows Insiders, but Microsoft is now saying that it's available for developers. I'm assuming outside of the testing bed. Again, I'm not a developer, but you guys let us know if you're able to access that. If not, we will reach out to Nadella and ask him to open it up for us. The Windows subsystem for Linux allows users to run their favorite Linux tools, utilities, and apps for developer workflows. This new feature expands its support to include new GUI apps that work right out of the box. And this is according to Microsoft. They also didn't list specifically what the apps were, but I think through sessions, which I didn't attend those specific ones because, again, I'm not a developer, that you'll get an idea of which apps are available. Maybe maybe we can ask one of our developer writers on staff to see if they can coalesce a list of the ones that are available right now. Maybe we can make that into a post for you guys next week. We'll run it by our editor and see if that's something that you might be interested in.
And then speaking of developers, they also had a Project Reunion 0.8 or 0.8, depending on how you want to say it. And if you remember last year, Project Reunion was a big thing because Microsoft promised it's the future and we're finally going to fix the app gap. We're going to reunite apps and we're going to remove roadblocks for developers. And since then, there have been a couple of releases. 0.5, I think, came back in March, and it was the first the production ready version that people could actually use. But now they announced version 0.8, and this allows there are a few goals in mind with this release. Developers can now create and modernize their Windows apps for both client and cloud endpoints. It comes with support of Windows 10 version 1809, the ability to use Project Reunion with a .NET 5 app, and Windows UI library WinUI 3, and Microsoft Edge Web View 2. Woo, what a mouthful. And then they also announced how it's able to modernize Windows 10. There was an interesting quote in the Build Book of News that we had where they said, Project Reunion gives access to modern Windows technologies that customers can incrementally adopt faster because they are decoupled from the OS.
Yeah. So again, they are containerizing elements that are necessary or that are being leveraged from apps from previous versions of Windows, and saying that you can still have access to them and make your app more modern without having to necessarily use the operating system itself. So again, good news. I'm hoping that they speed up development on this. I know, again, they had mentioned this mid last year or whatnot. And so we're only at 0.1. We're not even at 1.0 yet. But I think if this all goes back to modernizing Windows, making new Windows experiences, and getting developers on board to just basically make new features for their app, not create new apps, but just give us new features for their apps. This is a big step in that right direction.
So why don't you get us into the Teams news, because Teams is all the rage these days. It's what everyone is talking about.
That's what the kids on the street, they always tell me, hey, sir, you using Teams? They don't say that. No one says that. But as far as Teams news is concerned, Microsoft is introducing new capabilities and tools that will empower developers to create more interactive apps for improving meetings and experiences in Teams. Again, Teams is becoming its own platform, or it has been its own platform for some time, and Microsoft is putting a ton of development behind it. It may sprawl out to be the new productivity suite. You'll say like, oh, do you have Teams versus like, are you using Office at some point? Some of the new features include a shared staging integration, which I think they launched last week. It might have been right after build or after some of the sessions. That feature brings a new configuration to facilitate quote unquote real-time and multi-user collaboration experiences in popular apps used in Teams meetings. So you'll be able to collaborate and point and things like that in different apps, not just apps that Teams related, but say if you're using like OneNote or something like that, you'll be able to pull those in. The new meeting event API is another innovation that is now available but it's only in preview for some developers. The API can now be used to automate common workflows like meeting starts and events that will support events later this year. So maybe you start to set up your own schedules and let people, alert people about them. Hopefully send out recaps or debriefings, things like that, which again is more automated versus you having to kind of give the notes at the end of the meeting, handwritten things like that, and remember who to send it to and who to CC and BCC on those things. Microsoft is also planning to launch a media API with resource-specific content this summer, allowing developers to access audio, video feeds in quote-unquote real time for note-taking, insights, gathering, translations, transcriptions, and many other scenarios. Again, this is just part of that debriefing aspect of a meeting, and it just makes it easier for people to get on with all the stuff that you're supposed to be doing that came from the meeting. So, there are a lot of meetings where I've gone in, had to take notes, but by the time I'm done giving out the notes, the day's gone by and I didn't get to any of the stuff that we talked about in the meeting. There's a new Together mode extensibility for Teams meetings, and it's coming this summer. And it should make video conferencing even more engaging for attendees by allowing creators to design custom Together mode scenes. So I think right now we have that weird, like, I don't know, it looks like
Auditorium. It looks like everyone is.
auditorium, or I always looks like a telethon to me. Like, so maybe you can make an auditorium, more impressive auditorium, or you can put people on the beach, or put them in a mountain somewhere like Mount Rushmore, and just have everybody's heads up there.
So
But
even though all these things are for developers right now, eventually they'll make their way into consumer features, which is why we want to mention them really quick.
yeah, definitely. This is the probably the most consumer thing that we got out of Build
Yeah,
between this and Outlook.
yeah.
Microsoft Teams. Speaking of which, Microsoft Teams and Outlooks on the web will soon get support for message extensions, which will offer a consolidated development environment for creating extensions for both platforms. So I don't know specifically what those details were because again, I wasn't in on that session, and Della kind of breezed through a lot of these opener things. And it's it was like 45 minutes, very short intro, this keynote. But we do have pieces on our site that give more detail about that. So again, for now, this is just look for message extensions coming soon for Outlook and Teams.
And then they also had something about fluid components. I know this was introduced last year at Build, but now it's finally coming to Teams, and it will allow you to copy over real-time tables and text and edit it across all the different Office apps simultaneously, which is another big story.
Yeah, it's big because it's in the wake of I think Google Workspaces, which they announced at Google I/O, which follows a similar path of being able to launch or take parts of an app, a productivity app within another one. So you don't have to necessarily jump out of a tab, if you're in Chrome or using Google, jump out of a tab into another tab to open up Sheets or anything like that. You can basically pull in the functionality of Sheets into your or slides or whatever, and get all that functionality versus again jumping out of it. So fluid components are a very similar concept, as you had mentioned, being able to pull out text and tables and lists and action items and put those in a Word doc without having to go into Excel, build it out, copy paste it into there. You'll just be able to kind of go somewhere into the menu and use any of those things. So again, this is to speed up productivity and to for anybody who's on the web, keep your tabs cleared so you don't have 5,000 different tabs open.
And then they also rebranded the App Studio for Microsoft Teams to the Developer Portal, which is basically cleaning things up and helping making it easier for developers to build apps for Teams, which, as you said, Teams is suddenly becoming its own platform.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in order of priority, it becomes Teams, Azure, Office,
Outlook, and then
Outlook,
Windows.
Xbox, then Windows.
Yep. But speaking of Outlook, here we go. You're bringing back the segues, aren't you?
I'm trying here. I'm trying. There are two new features coming soon. It's Organization Explorer and Message Extension, as we previously discussed, and it's coming for Outlook for the web. I don't know if I really am praying that we start to get some new features for Outlook on the desktop that make streamlining and triaging email a little easier. I know that every time I open up Outlook, there's always like that little box that says, "Hey, look what's new," and it's look, we put the search menu bar 3 inches over to the right. I mean, but
uh,
Outlook for the web seems to be getting a ton of new features, and I'm hoping some of that stuff gets backport it in a very consistent and intuitive way. Anyway, Organization Explorer is a new embedded app for Outlook that will be coming this summer. Its goal is to help people find coworkers or team or people in teams with similar skills as your own, so you guys can collaborate together. I mean, it's kind of like if you're using whatever the project is and somebody has a title in their, I guess, job description or in their bio or things like that, and within your company that you can surface that information and say like, hey, Corey, the graphic designer, and I'm building out this website, he's being listed or suggested to me to work on this project. I should reach out to him. Again, it's just makes it easier for you to kind of Rolodex the necessary people for projects. It sounds
And
like.
then and then the message extensions, again, it's more of a feature for developers, but eventually whatever they develop will make its way to you, and it's a feature that with the aim of making your email process easier, with the support for message extensions on outlook.com. Not Outlook, developers should see a unified experience across both Teams and Outlook for the web. So basically you make one extension here and it works everywhere else.
Yeah, and again, it just works. You get that, Microsoft? It just works. That's what they need to nail down.
And that's it for Build. We're finished with Build for now. But again, you could visit onmicrosoft.com, click the Build 2021 topic at the top of the page, and scroll through the entire list to see our list of articles, all the news, all the rumors, everything you need to know. But now, speaking of rumors, time to talk about Nadella and something he said about the next generation of Windows. I'll leave it to you because I know you're constantly texting and you're constantly calling Satya Nadella.
I am. And so he and I were going back and forth on whether I should even mention this. And he, without my consent, just blurted it out. No, I'm just kidding. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, during his keynote during Build, mentioned the amount of devices that Windows is on, which I think he said is at 1.3 billion as of right now. And with that being said, there are a avenue of different things that people want from their operating system and how they want it to work. And he's mentioned that after listing all the things that are happening in 21H1 that should be coming out this year, uh, that he's hinted at the next generation of Windows, and that led everyone to run to their keyboards and start typing out what new names Windows should be called, and what this could mean, and what this is in
Windows
relation to
Windows as a service where you
Windows as a
pay
service.
$2 a month to pay for Windows 10.
Yeah, or again, how this is in the backdrop of them canceling Windows 10X, what this means. So, and with them also saying that they're going to take bits of Windows 10X and put it into the new next generation of Windows. What we're, at least I'm thinking of with this announcement, is that he was very specific about making new tools and ways for developers to monetize themselves on Windows. So I'm thinking that this is going to be a play for the Windows Store, lower fees, new design, hopefully better search functionality. Put a lot into allowing people to basically port over their web experiences to the store. So if you're buying Filmora, you can just look it up in the Windows Store versus having to go to the website itself. Direct people to here is a containerized version of the web, but you still let the developer kind of control that experience, and you just make it easier to download the thing so that they can get paid. They have two places to put stuff, and this helps Windows in general because now people will want to say, I need the Microsoft Store to get this app versus I just need a computer to jump on the web to find whatever it is I need. It's a subtle bit of lock-in, kind of playing the Apple lock-in game where it's the Microsoft Store presents you the thing that you need versus I need to go out and search it for myself. Other people, like Zach Bowden, my buddy, thinks this is more of, again, a grandiose endeavor as far as creating a whole revamp of the Windows 10 experience. I know that they're putting a lot of emphasis in touch keyboard right now. A lot of the updates we've seen over the last few weeks have been about the touch experience and keyboard in Windows 10. There's a lot they still need to do as far as transitioning from apps, the start menu, the full scale start menu when you're in touch tablet mode. There's a lot of tablet mode stuff that they pulled out of Windows 8. It pulled out of Windows 10 that was from Windows 8 that made things easier, like the URL at the bottom of the screen if you're holding a device this way, or where's your thumbs at the lower part of it to type in things. Uh, they need to bring all of that back. Make the tablet experience, second to none on the device itself. So again, the pessimist in me says this is just a play for the Microsoft Store and maybe a few touchings of shades of gray in the menu settings. The optimist in me is hoping that again this new taskbar that or the way that you're shifting the taskbar becomes something new, that they consolidate the settings menus. If even if you don't get rid of the secondary control panel, at least give us the option to theme it so that the backdrop is the same shade of gray as the regular settings menu. The icons all match. You don't have these like weird retrofitted 95 icons that are just updated with
All
new
right. Yeah.
colors.
Yeah.
Make sure that your iconography, your typeface, and your scaling. That's the other thing. Like you can instantly see a 95 control panel or settings by the super scrunchy pixelated
Yep.
scaling. Like if you can get the scaling all the same, you don't necessarily need to get rid of all of the different ways that we can access device menus. So
But I don't think it's the first time that we actually heard specifically next generation of Windows. I think Panos Panay teased it at Ignite. So, but the thing that got me thinking about this is the fact that he said that. Let me pull up the quote from the article real quick here in chat.
yeah, I was going
He
for
said his quote is Windows brings together all your developer and collaboration tools in one place. It lets you choose the hardware you want, works with Linux and Windows environments as one, and has a modern terminal. And soon we will share one of the most significant updates to Windows of the past decade to excuse me, to unlock greater economic opportunity for developers and creators. And here is the part that got me thinking. He says, I have been self hosting it over the past several months, and I am incredibly excited about the next generation of Windows. Our promise to you is this. We will create more opportunity for every Windows developer today and welcome every creator who is looking for the more innovative new open platform to build and distribute and monetize applications. We look forward to sharing more very soon. So I'm probably like Zach and I'm overthinking it. But
it.
the fact that he said during build that he has been self-hosting it makes me figure that this is Sun Valley and this is everything that we've been thinking of, and that it's not just a new store like you discussed. It has to be something new that has him coming out saying, I'm self hosting it and I'm using it and it's amazing.
Again, I am hoping that that's exactly what it is. But I've also lived during a time where Microsoft
Yeah.
overpromises and underdelivers. So I'm setting myself up for if it's just a store update to be like, yay, we got a store update. And again, being very critical of it because just because you change the size of the icons and you change some of the fluent design at it, it's one of the worst search experiences out there. So
All right.
fix that search engine. Let us make sure we get to the places we need to go. When I type in, um, video editing, I don't want tutorials on how to video edit. I want software on how to video edit. So fix that, and we can start talking.
But generally speaking, I know in my other publication, I wrote this. Lauren messaged me here and said, "You wrote fake news because build is never about consumers and it's never about Windows and it's all about developers and Azure and
Yes.
cloud and all the stuff that we skipped here because who wants to talk for an hour about Azure?" But anyway, the expectation was that build would be all about Sun Valley and everything that we heard the past month or so in the past few months, mainly from Zach, because he's the one who's all these rumors are coming from.
I
But
mean,
that was the
Brad Sams has got some stuff too.
yeah, that was the expectation that we would see Sun Valley and we would hear more about that stuff, but we never did, and it ended up being another disappointing build where it was not really about consumers, aside from the Windows 10 and ARM news. So generally speaking, I know we're running long here and we were going on and on and on, but has build been disappointing for you? For me, it is because I expected Sun Valley and I expected them to talk more about Windows 10 and the future of Windows 10, even though we do believe there's a separate event coming up. But do you think that build has been disappointing?
That's a good question. I don't think so. From a enthusiastic Windows side person, as it's a way to organize the development of Windows. So we kind of have a timetable, a roadmap on what to expect in the fall, and we haven't gotten that very clearly. Um, I think they've relied on their insider development process to kind of do a lot of that explanation. But for those of us who don't use Insider or aren't on certain channels, we don't get any of these features. We don't get any of that communication. So that's been the letdown for music communication. I understand that they're focusing on developers and their pivot to the cloud, where they lean heavy on, um, has made that the focus of these things. I think they have to reconsider that the way they communicate with people. I think a dedicated Windows event that isn't developer focused, because the tools in Windows that they're leveraging aren't necessarily some things people need in Windows itself. Like the Windows, I think the Linux subsystem is probably the biggest thing, and they talked about that at length. And I think they had 15 different sessions about that. That's probably the most functional part of Windows that developers need to know about as far as the consumer stuff, about the stuff that gets us excited, the colors, the changes of icons, transitions, the animations, the consistency. That can be done in a separate event that is, that developers don't necessarily need to worry themselves about, pay money to go see, or Microsoft had to spend time explaining. So that's where I see that. You can also see that kind of happening in Google's side. I was listening to like This Week in Tech or whatever, and they were talking about ousting Sundar Pichai because he doesn't make Google exciting. I'm like, well, Google is kind of in the same thing. They've gotten so big, and Android is just one aspect of Google that they're focusing on more grandiose things for the developers. And so we're starting to see this shift of developer focused things and then consumer related things maybe in the fall. So again, maybe host an event right before announce all the devices, or hosted during the devices, because that's where Microsoft shines. And I think that's what they might be planning with Panos. It's easier to explain and show why you need a Surface laptop or a Surface Studio or Surface things
Right,
when you can show these are all the
right,
cool new things that are coming from Windows, versus here's all the cool new things coming from Windows in May. I hope you remember those things when I tell you that this is the new device you need to get. So if you
right,
can kind of pair those things together, it'd be great. I know Apple's going to blow the doors off its developer thing because they kind of do that all at once, because they're constantly just putting out hardware. And I feel like that's been their like mantra, is just to blitzkrieg everything. And like, here's hardware. And these are the operating systems to function that hardware, which is why they get away with that. So Microsoft, do it in the fall when you announce new devices, and showcase the features on Windows that make these devices kind of shine.
And speaking of shining, we're done with Build now. We're done with Windows now. We're moving on to Edge 91, which was shining because it does have some new features that Microsoft announced. The sleeping tabs feature that you first saw in Microsoft Edge 89 is now even better in Microsoft Edge 91, thanks to some under the hood changes. Microsoft says that in Edge 91, sleeping tabs now saves you up to 82% more memory than before, according to their data. And it could put ads to sleep when you put tabs in the background, and it helps saves you more RAM. And additionally, also new in Edge 91 is some more ways to personalize the web browser. They do have 10 new color themes, which you could find in the appearance page in the settings. And also, the new tab page has a new personalized button to help you tailor your news and interests, which you might also be seeing in your taskbar soon if you didn't install the optional update yet. And then another thing new in Edge 91 is shopping, which I know a lot of people might be doing for back to school season and for the Memorial Day weekend. Well, there's a new feature where Bing rebates is directly integrated into Edge, where if you go on a certain website and you see the price tag, the blue price tag icon, if you click that icon, you'll see a list of how the price of that specific item has changed, and you'll also see the ability to get cash back on that item if you buy it through Bing rebates. And that's what's new in Edge 91.
Yeah, and just to kind of let people know that there are at least some big name retailers. So, for those of you who are Etsy shoppers, that rebate thing still shows up. But for those of you who, are more mainstream things, we have Amazon, Walmart, Best Buy, Target, Home Depot, and Macy's are all partnered in this. So if you shop any of those big box locations, just know that you can start to see discounts and rebates on that kind of stuff from those places.
And that is that for Edge. Now we're entering our fast recap segment, and I'll give us 10 minutes to get through all of these topics. So 10 minutes on the clock right now. And the first one is Microsoft's and Xbox Bethesda Game Showcase, which is coming up in a few weeks on June 13th. I'll let you talk about that one.
Yeah, I would say we only need about 4 minutes, so you can probably change that if you want to in post editing. But again, we mentioned earlier that June 13th, Microsoft and Bethesda are going to be holding an event that we believe will be focused on new announcements as far as the structure of Bethesda and Microsoft exclusivity, probably either to or against that notion. I believe Microsoft will probably keep some timed exclusives, but for the most part, any Bethesda game that was already on the PlayStation platform will remain there. I do expect them to just kind of hint at in new IP. They probably won't have anything to show for it, but they'll at least say like, these are some of the concepts and the ideas that we have in mind. And that's basically about it. I think that, we'll probably hear some more information about Xbox and Xbox games, things like that, how the platform is doing. But I don't expect a lot out of this announcement. Probably half an hour, maybe 45 minutes of, hey, we own them, and we hope you guys like what's coming next.
It also coincides with the 20 years of Xbox thing that we talked about in our last episode, too. So expect a lot of Xbox news out of that event.
Yeah, nostalgic Xbox news. The next thing we can talk about is Microsoft wanted to revolutionize the Windows 10 experience, and this is again according to a job posting. So this goes back to Panos and Satya's idea of what the new Xbox, um, the new Windows experience is going to be. It's interesting that we're getting a job posting now, even though we're hopefully going to be seeing the end of development of Windows
By the
Sun
fall, yeah.
Valley.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that this is positions for someone who's going to help manage the timelines for new features that are coming. So you hired your engineering staff already. They've already put together what we're going to be seeing in Sun Valley, and this person and or people will now be saying, okay, now let's finish iterating on the things that we've presented, and how do we make sure that there's a natural progression and the new things that we're going to you kind of come up with, and why we need these technologies. So if it's stuff that is relevant to touch, maybe more touch development, this person is going to kind of manage. I don't think they're going to engineer or develop it, but they are going to organize when these things kind of drop, and how they communicate, I'm hoping.
And that's just the job posting, but we
Yeah.
already talked about the whole thing with Nadella and what he said about Windows and all the rumors. So this came before Bill, just to be clear.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And the last thing we have is the Surface Duo. I'll let you run with that one.
Yeah, I know our guest probably would be happy about this. Our previous guest, Shane Craig, who is a big Surface Duo fan, but now Microsoft has finally turned the Surface Duo into a much better gaming machine. They updated its Xbox game. They updated their Xbox Game Pass app for Android to improve support for custom touch controls on dual screen devices. So that's basically you, Surface Duo owners. You now be able to use one of the screens as your controller. And this is something that's been beta tested. So now it's just generally rolling out. And can you guess who announced it? It was Panos Panay himself, not someone from the Xbox team. Panay sent out a tweet and he was like, it's a very cool update for Surface Duo customers working with Xbox. We've put touch controls on the second screen. More than 50 games are now available to play for Xbox Game Pass Ultimate members. So there you go.
Yeah, I wonder how this would work for like the Z Fold though, because it's a sort of dual screen. There's no definitive or delineation between the screens. So I don't know if we'll be able to kind of use it the same way, but at least for Duo owners, you now again have a Nintendo Switch like experience. There've been a ton of, I think they're at what, 12 right now. I wouldn't say a ton, but 12 games that are at least touch enabled from Game Pass or maybe from XCloud. So hopefully with this new development, they'll be able to talk to the Xbox team to have those, have new games ported with this new controller setup, so that you have even more. You don't necessarily have to carry around the weird controller slash phone. You'll just be able to pop open the top of your current phone and start playing and get that same sort of experience. Again, I know first person shooters will probably suffer from this sort of kind of thing, but for anybody who's a platformer or a strategy role playing strategy game, these should be great for. You have one
It's
device
all
now.
It's all part of Microsoft's plan to turn the Duo into a new gaming machine because it flopped so much.
I mean, if they continue to sell it at $600, it may not be that bad of a deal. I mean, 8 gigabytes of RAM and those specific games being streamed in the cloud. If you have great bandwidth, it's a cool little idea to be like, not only do have I done finished triaging my email, now I'm going to turn it sideways and start playing something on my couch without having to like, set up the input on my new screen or interrupt my family from watching something else. I can just start playing a game right then and there, and then close it up and go about my day.
And now it's time for the week ahead. We finally reached the end of the podcast. I know it's been a long show, but hope you bared with us through it because we had a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And speaking of talking about, for the week ahead, Dell sent us a XPS 13 OLED unit, and this thing is phenomenal. I don't know if you guys have ever tried an OLED laptop. I know, have you, Kareem?
Yes, I have. I've gotten a few from Lenovo. I think I had one from HP back in the day.
Yeah, but OLED screens are amazing. As soon as you turn it on and you go to your web browser and you visit a web page, you will see the difference. Everything just looks so much more clearer. And then when you go to YouTube and you visit YouTube and you open up a video, it looks so lifelike, especially when you're watching like nature videos. That's what I did. I had a photo shoot with the laptop and I opened up YouTube and I put standard the two-in-one XPS 13, which I reviewed a few weeks ago, right next to the OLED XPS 13, and you could see the difference between the two, how more vibrant the OLED XPS 13 is. So yeah, that's just some quick early impressions, and look out for my review next week. And I know I'll let you talk about the what's next for Windows stuff before we get into our other thing about our special guests.
Yeah. Again, this is all kind of just touching back on the same things we've been talking about. This whole theme about Windows. We a lot of us in the industry are suspecting that there's going to be a what's next event where they focus on Windows because again they left a lot of it out of build. There's a lot to be said before Sun Valley just drops some people, so they're going to need to prime everyone's interest and education about Sun Valley if and when it does come out next fall or this fall. And there needs to be some event before that. You just don't drop like, oh, here's Sun Valley and good luck. It's going to be, here are the things that we've been working on, and you'll see them in late October, early November. So that gives us some time between the June 13th gaming event. They're going to want to space these two things out, and next fall or this fall coming up. So it could be hopefully the end of June, maybe probably more likely sometime in July. So to give it its own month to be to garner news. I doubt that they're going to wait till August to kind of do this because they'll probably have more gaming news in conjunction with that. So, and I know that they have another Ignite planned at the end of August or beginning of September. So I'm expecting sometime in early July, late June for this news to come out.
And that said, what's coming soon is next week we have a special interview with the YouTuber Michael MJD. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he does videos about vintage tech, including Microsoft and Apple. And check out his YouTube channel if you haven't already. He's a really fun guy to talk to, and we're looking forward to speaking with him and hearing what he has to say about his favorite tech, his thoughts on Windows, his thoughts on Microsoft, and so much more.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll see if we can get them talking about maybe Laserdisc or cassette tapes or the Zune.
Oh, yeah. And that's the last topic that I have, unless you have anything you want to add.
No, we're gonna let our people go, so you guys can go enjoy your weekend. You can find me at Mindhead1 on Twitter. Again, that's Mindhead1. They can find you.
A back journ.
Yeah, and again, visit on Microsoft and Twitter as well if you don't have time or don't want to visit the site, but still want to keep up on all the latest news, giveaways, interviews, announcements, I don't know, whatever else we talk about news-wise. You can all find it there.
All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you again soon. Same place, same time.
Everyone, finish getting vaccinated so we can all hang out together.
Yeah, we'll do like a giant Teams meeting, and we'll put you all together in virtual rooms.
Yeah, in a virtual auditorium that everyone's gonna hate.
And then we'll go outside and actually have a real meeting afterwards.
Compare and contrast.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.